Hey everyone, it's Ryder from Skip. I hope you're doing well. Important video today on the two major bills that are going to be voted on and what the latest thinking is on the $1 trillion infrastructure bill and the $3.5 trillion budget resolution, and how this relates to SBA and small business funding, especially EIDL grants and loans. Be sure to watch until the end. And before we get into the reconciliation mess, that's the opinion piece I'm about to share with you right now. Do us a huge favor, give this video a like, and if you're new, consider subscribing to our channel. Let's dive in. Major headlines coming out today. Lawmakers are back at it, struggling to reach deals on both of these major bills. These are opinion pieces from the Wall Street Journal. Biden's reconciliation mess. We must pass the infrastructure bill, unlike the Democrats' reckless $3.5 trillion spending spree. And from the Journal editorial board, $3.5 trillion is a phony number. Budget tricks disguise the true cost of Biden's vast entitlement plans. I'm going to go over the main points people have laid out here. Would love to hear your opinion. Are you for the infrastructure bill, the reconciliation bill, neither, or both? So drop it in the comments today. I'll also run a poll on Monday about this. Now is the time to speak up, to share your opinion. So I'll give you some important context here. First, the quote, Biden reconciliation mess. Again, these are other people's opinions. I'm just relaying here. Democrats' disarray in Congress is a sign nobody is in charge at the White House, by Kimberly Strassel. Here's the quick take. Speaker Nancy Pelosi in late August dragooned her centrist into voting to begin a reconciliation bill, late August, in return for her promise they'd get a vote on their bipartisan $1 trillion infrastructure bill no later than September 27th. So that's why there's that September 27th date. It's the promise from Pelosi that both will be voted on by then, but give us some time to get the budget reconciliation approved. The quote goes on, Democratic leaders figured a month was long enough to bully members into submission on the reconciliation bill's substance and a $3.5 trillion price tag, and to tie the two votes together. But fights broke out over Medicare, drug pricing, climate provisions, and means testing. House committee chairman rolled over objections and rushed out bills only to confront a stalled Senate. Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema have refused to be rolled or rushed on the package, and the Monday deadline looms. Monday is the 27th. Centrists say, give us the infrastructure vote or reconciliation is toast. Progressives say, give us the $3.5 trillion or infrastructure is history. So that is one blunt take. I would love to hear your reactions when you hear that. The main point of this is that there's a lot of squabbling going on, and her argument here is saying that the best thing that might happen to Mr. Biden now would be the collapse of reconciliation. The press would label it a defeat, and progressives would howl. But if a breakdown took the monstrosity off the table, it would provide the president an opportunity to reset, to refocus on a bipartisan bill, and to recast himself as reasonable and in charge. Now, I want to bring up the editorial board's opinion here on why the $3.5 trillion is a phony number. Again, in videos in the past, I talked about the major impacts this budget reconciliation would have on everyone in the country, period. That's not hyperbole. It would have massive effects in terms of the universal pre-K, changes to Medicare, healthcare, drug prices, climate change, free community college, a whole host of other things. Well, here is a very pointed take from the editorial board. Democrats are grasping for ways to finance their cradle-to-grave welfare state, with the left demanding what they claim is $3.5 trillion over 10 years. The truth is that even the gargantuan number hides the real costs of their plans. Even if the bill shrinks to $2 trillion or less, the real costs will be far greater. Behold, one of the greatest fiscal cons in history. Again, this is the Journal's editorial board that came together to write this piece. They give a couple examples here I want to point out for your consideration. Starting with the child allowance, that's one of the bill's most expensive provisions, extending $3,000 to $3,600 per child payments for a decade would cost roughly $1.1 trillion, but that's only over 10 years. So the main point here is that if that program continues, it will cost another $110 billion each year. Another thing pointed out is the Medicare expansion, that there will be new vision and hearing benefits included that would kick in over the next 2 years and cost about $20 billion a year. But Democrats are delaying the phase-in of the much more expensive dental benefit to 2028. This quote saves $420 billion over 10 years, but the costs explode after that. Anyway, this piece goes on and on with examples criticizing the spending. I want to leave it there because there's a lot more examples pointing that out. Really want to hear your opinion on this. 1 month ago, we did a poll. If you were Congress, would you support the $1 trillion infrastructure and $3.5 trillion budget blueprint? Almost 3,000 votes then. 54%, so half of you, said you would support both bills. 8% said you'd only support infrastructure bill. 5% only the budget reconciliation. And a third said you wouldn't support any of this spending. These may be voted on next week, and this is massive spending that will directly affect you, your families, your kids, generations to come. The last opinion piece here, quote, "We must pass the infrastructure bill, unlike the Democrats' reckless 3.5 trillion spending spree." So I pulled out today a few examples that are, of course, critical of the budget reconciliation. Here it says, these infrastructure investments are vital to the country's future. It starts off, the devastation left by Hurricane Ida has brought the national debate about America's dilapidated infrastructure into clearer perspective. Now, one argument could be made that the bigger debate should in fact be about climate change, and therefore we should focus on the reconciliation spending, especially with regards to climate change. So I think there's a very strong argument there. But of course, you can also tie in infrastructure. Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act would give the Army Corps of Engineers $17 billion for coastal restoration, levee construction, and flood mitigation. It includes $12.5 billion to improve the resilience of the nation's electrical grid, $65 billion in broadband, and the piece says conservatives should want government to make these sort of investments. This piece is from Mr. Cassidy, who's a Republican U.S. Senator from Louisiana. Okay, share what you think below. Now, as we know, if the infrastructure bill gets passed, there's going to be around $20 billion taken away from SBA funding, so there's that as well. That's specifically for the targeted grants, those 10K grants, which is why I've said a few times this week, now is the time to apply or double check your eligibility. I'll link to that video at the end. There's no new EIDL loans report today. Over the weekend, I'll be doing more Q&A answers. I'll be sharing some of the comments that you've left in this video. And lastly, we've just opened up new spots for one-on-one personalized support. If you want personal support for your funding situation, your EIDL situation, whether you're trying for reconsideration or you're trying for an increase, we can help. Invite link is right in the description. Use that link. We now have a special invite code so you can skip the waiting list. You'll skip the around 2,000 people that are in line. You'll skip them and you'll get a slot early next week. Again, that's for one-on-one support for business funding, EIDL funding, and more. Most importantly, thanks so much for giving this video a thumbs up. Have a great weekend. Stay well, stay healthy, and I'll see you tomorrow.